The hunter's moon. The moon hung high in the sky, a sliver of silver against the velvet black night. It wasn't quite full, not yet, but its pale light sliced through the trees like a knife. Sarah adjusted her grip on the shotgun, its cold steel comforting in her hands. The weight of it reminded her that she wasn't helpless, not yet, not like her family had been. She had been hunting them for years, the beasts that had torn through her life, leaving nothing but blood and horror in their wake. The smell of wet fur, the sound of bones snapping, the scream that still echoed in her mind. She had tracked them through forests, across forgotten towns, through shadowed streets where whispers of their existence remained only in the memories of terrified locals. Now, she was here. The final stretch. Her breath came in slow, measured inhales as she crouched at the edge of the clearing, eyes scanning the underbrush. Every rustle, every whisper of wind through the trees set her on edge. She had learned to recognize the signs, the unnatural quiet that settled over the woods, the distant howls that made your skin tighten, the gut-wrenching stench of rotting flesh lingering in the air. She could feel them just out of sight, waiting, watching. Her pulse quickened. They were close. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest like a hammer as she moved forward, silent and deliberate. Her footsteps were ghosts on the forest floor. She had no choice. This was her only chance. The moon was climbing higher, and soon it would be too late. A low growl rumbled from the shadows, deep and menacing. The air shifted around her, cold and sharp, and she could feel the weight of eyes on her, countless eyes in the darkness. Her finger tightened on the trigger as her eyes darted, scanning the tree line, looking for the glint of fur, the flash of yellowed eyes, but nothing but blackness. The growl grew louder, closer. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. And then, snap, a twig cracked just behind her, too close, and she spun on instinct, shotgun raised. The blast of the shot tore through the night, lighting up the clearing for a fraction of a second. But there was nothing there. Her breath came in sharp gasps now, adrenaline pumping, her body tense and trembling. And then, from the corner of her eye, movement. Fast, too fast. A blur of gray and black bolting through the trees. She fired again, this time hitting something solid. A pained yelp echoed through the trees. Got one. She pushed through the underbrush, her heartbeat pounding in her ears, following the trail of blood smeared across the forest floor. It led her deeper into the woods, the stench growing thicker with each step. The scent of death, of decay, hung in the air, clinging to the trees like a shroud. And there, in a small clearing, lay the body. Its fur was matted, dark with blood, eyes wide and glassy, the snarl still frozen on its face. Sarah took a step forward, her chest heaving, the victory hollow in her gut. She'd killed so many of them, but it never brought her any closer to peace. Never made the nightmares go away. As she crouched next to the corpse, inspecting her kill, she felt it, a presence behind her. The hairs on her arms rose, a shiver running down her spine. Slowly she turned her head, eyes wide. A shape loomed from the shadows, massive, hulking. The outline of a beast. Her heart dropped. It was him, the Alpha. Before she could even raise the gun, he lunged, his teeth bared, glistening in the moonlight. His weight slammed into her, the impact driving the air from her lungs as she crashed into the dirt. She struggled, kicking, clawing at his thick hide, but his strength was overwhelming. His claws raked down her side, shredding through her shirt, her skin burning as blood began to soak through. She grabbed for her knife, plunging it into his side with all her might, a snarl escaping her lips as she twisted the blade. He howled in pain, stumbling back just long enough for her to scramble to her feet. But it was too late. A searing pain exploded in her arm, and she looked down to see his teeth clamped around her wrist, blood pouring from the wound. Her vision blurred with the pain, her scream tearing through the night. With a desperate swing, she smashed the butt of the shotgun into his snout, sending him staggering back. She didn't waste another second. She ran. Branches tore at her clothes, her legs screaming with each step as she pushed through the forest, heart racing. The pain in her arm throbbed, the bite burning with a fire that seemed to spread through her veins. Her breath was ragged, her body weak, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't look back. Finally, she reached the edge of the woods, collapsing into the safety of her truck. Her hands trembled as she clutched her arm, the blood still dripping between her fingers. But it wasn't just the wound that terrified her. She could feel it, something dark, something wrong, spreading, changing, the bite. And the moon wasn't full yet, not yet. The pain coursing through Sarah's arm was unlike anything she had ever felt. It wasn't just the bite, it was something deeper, something ancient that clawed at her insides. Her vision blurred as she leaned back against the truck, struggling to catch her breath. She knew what this was. She had seen it before in the eyes of those she hunted, watched as they succumbed to the transformation. their bodies twisting into something inhuman. But it couldn't happen to her, not her. She pressed her hand to the bite, trying to stop the bleeding, but the wound throbbed with a dark energy, a poison that seeped into her very core. Her thoughts began to scatter, her mind clouded with the primal urge to run, to hunt, to kill. No, not like this. Sarah reached for her shotgun, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with the shells. She could end it. She had to. She wouldn't let herself turn into one of them, wouldn't let herself become the monster she had spent her life hunting. She would die before that happened. But as she loaded the gun, her hand froze. A voice, soft, barely a whisper, cut through the fog in her mind. Sarah? Her heart stopped. She looked up, eyes wide, scanning the dark tree line, but no one was there. The woods were silent, the wind dead, yet the voice had been so clear, so familiar. Sarah, come to me. Her pulse quickened as a cold wave of dread washed over her. She pushed herself up, staggering toward the woods, the gun still clutched in her hands. Something called to her, pulling her deeper into the forest, like an invisible thread wrapped tight around her heart. The voice grew louder as she stumbled through the trees, the bite on her arm pulsing in time with her heartbeat. And then, just ahead, in a clearing bathed in moonlight, she saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the woods, cloaked in shadows. Sarah froze. The figure stepped forward, and as the moonlight hit its face, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a woman, her skin pale and her hair long, silver, catching the light like strands of silk. Her eyes were dark, but there was something about them, something familiar. And then Sarah saw the truth, the realization slamming into her like a freight train. Mom? The word escaped her lips before she could stop it, her voice breaking. The woman, her mother, smiled, a sad, distant smile, and nodded. It's me. Sarah shook her head, disbelief tightening her chest. But you died. I saw you die. The wolves, they killed you. Her mother's smile faded, her eyes dropping to the ground. No, I wasn't killed. I was cursed. The same curse that runs through your veins now. Sarah's mind reeled, her body trembling as the truth settled in. Her mother, the leader of the pack she had spent years hunting, was alive. Alive, but twisted by the curse of the wolves. Why? Sarah choked out, her voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you come back? Her mother took a step forward, her eyes softening. I couldn't. I couldn't let you see me like this, like them. I've been fighting it for years, Sarah, just like you will, but you still have a choice. Tears burned in Sarah's eyes as the pain in her arm intensified. A choice? I'm already turning, I can feel it. Her mother's gaze darkened. Not yet. You can still break the curse. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Break it? Was it possible? She had spent so long believing this was a death sentence that there was no way out. But how? Her mother took another step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. You have to forgive. Forgive what was done to us. Forgive the wolves. That is the key. The rage, the hatred. That's what keeps the curse alive. If you let it go, you can stop it before the full moon rises. Sarah stared at her, the disbelief washing over her again. Forgiveness? How could she forgive the monsters that had slaughtered her family? The beasts that had torn her life apart? But as she looked into her mother's eyes, she realized the truth. The curse wasn't just about the bite. It was about the darkness it fed on, the hatred that consumed you from the inside out. She had spent years feeding that darkness, and now it threatened to take her completely. Tears streamed down her face as she closed her eyes, the memories of her family flooding her mind. The night of the attack, the blood, the screams. She had carried that rage for so long, let it fester in her soul until there was nothing left but the hunt. But her mother was right. If she didn't let it go, the curse would claim her, just like it had claimed so many before her. I forgive you, she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. I forgive all of you. For a moment, nothing happened. The forest was silent, the air still. But then, a warmth began to spread through her body, a soft glow that started in her chest and radiated outward. The pain in her arm began to fade, the burning in her blood subsiding. She opened her eyes, and her mother was smiling at her, tears in her own eyes. You did it, her mother whispered. You broke the curse. Sarah dropped to her knees, the weight of it all crashing down on her. The moon above was bright, nearly full, but its pull no longer gnawed at her. The darkness inside her was gone, replaced by a calm she hadn't felt in years. Her mother knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around Sarah in a gentle embrace. For the first time in years, Sarah felt at peace. The hunt was over, the nightmare had ended, and she was free. "I love you, Sarah," her mom said. The end.